Hello, welcome everyone, and thank you for coming to our talk about our decolonization project, Stage 1, that happened between January and July of this year. This project was funded by Welsh Government Anti-Racist Wales Culture, Heritage and Sports Fund. I am Paz Tejada, my co-worker here is Elesha-Joy Davis, and we're both collection officers at MonLife Museum. Next slide, please.
So just a little bit of introduction about us. So we work for MonLife in Monmouthshire, which is in southeast Wales. And these are our different sites. Today, I'm just going to talk mainly about Chepstow and Abergavenny museums, which is the focus of this part of the project. Next slide, please. So as my colleague mentioned, our project is part of the Welsh Government's Anti-Racist Wales Action Plan. So just a little quote from that document. The goal is to make a measurable change to the lives of ethnic minority people by tackling racism. So what does that mean for us in the project? So sort of main goals are to open the narrative of our collections to other voices, other interpretations. I'm sure you're all aware that often museums have a sort of singular traditional voice. And we want to make that more open and also to make what we do more complete by adding in parts that have been historically excluded. So it's a process, it's not a finished product. We don't have the answers and we, as my colleague will say later, this is a live thing that we're still very actively sort of thinking about. Next slide, please. So just a little bit on the beginning of the project. So one of the things that happened to start the project is that we had a collections report commissioned by from an external researcher, Peter Alexander. So that was funded by initially by the Welsh Government's Race Equality Action Plan pilot programme, and then for Chepstow, and then later by the Federation of Museums and Galleries in Wales for Abergavenny. So Peter had his own list of relevant terms that he used to search our database, so terms that brought up links between our collections and the British Empire, colonization and slavery. And we also, at this early stage of the project, benefited a lot by a short course run by Marion Gwynn, some of you might be familiar with, who's a really important voice in this area in Wales, and she helped us form our ideas at this early stage of the project. So I'm just going to pass you back to Paz for a bit, and next slide.
So now we're going to talk about what we did in stage 1 of the project. From Peter's report, we set to work improving our database, uploading the new information, and continue doing research, and finally, presenting the information to the public as a gallery intervention and a website page. Stage 2 has to do with the public engagement and consultation part. This work is ongoing at the moment. Next slide, please. We did our own search in the collection to see what things Peter's report had missed. For this, we use Carissa 2 Inclusive Terminology Glossary. It's an open resource with collaboration at the center. I recommend to anyone interested or who wants to know more about inclusive or derogatory language to visit the site. Anna is sharing the link in the comments right now. So this new search gave us interesting results, but the most interesting one was that there were missing descriptions in some objects. Searchers relied on the object description, and when that is missing or is too short, it makes some stories go under the radar. We found relevant objects have been missing because the description failed to mention important details. This could be because of poor accession procedures, or because these details were considered irrelevant or too difficult at the time. Once we found the objects, we made an action list to change the entries so these objects could be found and used in the future. For example, we added historical context notes, we used categories, and we changed the description in some entries when pertinent. Next slide, please. We also wrote a language statement to be added in our website page. Again, Anna is going to share this link in the comments if anyone wants to see it. It was important to us to have a statement because it brings the essence of why we're doing this work and it's shared to the public in simple words. We started by searching other museums' language statements, but the main text came from our own museum, and it can be resumed in the first line of it. We are committed to bring local histories to everyone. The key thing we wanted to communicate in this text were using clear language to include the actions that we were taking, why we're doing it, and the most important is that we are not ignorant of the negative impact that language and our objects can have in people. It also gives us place to include a new email so the public can feedback directly to the collection team, because feedback is a vital part of this type of project. Next slide, please. So now we're going to work with the objects. We thought the best way to describe the next steps of the project was using one of the objects that was in it. We decided we will use sugar tongs here because they're always they look a bit innocuous. It's an everyday object. Most social history museums will have a couple of them laying around. Before the project, the only information we have in the database was its physical description and donor information, which reflects a straightforward story. Next slide, please. After the research and the course we did with Marion, we realized that there was more to the tongs than a simple story. The object is strongly related to sugar and the way it has been produced at the time this object was in use. The information discovered connected this object to other topics and other stories and link an Abigail object with a bigger empire narrative. It's interesting for us how a common object has now a bigger story to tell, and one that involves human suffering, which leads us to the question of how to present this new impactful information. So Elesha will tell you more about how we did that. Next slide, please.
Hi, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the keyword tagging system, and then I'm going to link it to the sugar tongs that Paz just mentioned. So it was really important to us to make sure that this information was going to be useful in the future. And in order for that to be the case, it needed to be findable and searchable, recallable. So we decided on a keyword tagging system that was based on a taxonomy, so in categorization of animals in nature. So it starts with a parent, so in this case, empire and colonization, and it branches out again into more specific children. So we started off by looking at the report, and the objects highlighted in the report shaped the categories because everything highlighted in the report needed a place to live in the taxonomy. And we wrote it initially ourselves, and then we had several consultations with our team, wrote definitions of our categories, got it agreed by everybody, and then assigned the objects to categories or more than one category. And then we put those on modes on the slightly more technical side in the classification field. They're easily, so you can bring them up on search, you can easily count them, easily subset them, export them. That's really useful. Next slide, please. So here's the taxonomy. So as you can see, it starts with the one parent, branches out to children. Haven't included all of the very further specific grandchildren, if you will, because we don't have so much space on the slide. But so for the sugar tongs, so they would fit in trade and industry consumables because the relevant quality is the sugar, not the material that they're made of, so they would count as a consumable. And also transatlantic slave trade, products of a slave economy, because of where sugar was being made at that time, mostly in the Caribbean, by enslaved labor. So that's the basics of the taxonomy. Can I have the next slide, please? So on to interventions. So what I say when I mean intervention is a physical panel in our gallery spaces. So they're visually distinct from existing displays, and they're put on a little stand or next to the object or on the wall in a way that's sort of clear that they were added on later because we had extra things to say. And we wanted to get in this sort of quick win and do something now instead of waiting for the possibility of more funding in the future. and also to have something in the gallery to sort of show for this work and to start introducing sort of these ideas. So these are the big questions that we were sort of thinking about when we were doing this. What are we going to say? How are we going to say it? How are we going to talk about it? We thought a lot about the tone of the display boards, how we wanted to sound. We didn't want a sort of confrontational tone, but we did want to be prompting people to think a bit more and to explore things they might not have before. So we wrote, similarly to the taxonomy, our interventions originated with Paz and I, and then they went to our wider team and also to Marion Gwynn, our critical friend, who was really helpful with like factual inaccuracies and that sort of thing. So it was really good to sort of get everybody's approval on it and what we were going to say. Next slide, please. So you can see as a picture of one of our interventions in the space. So in Abergavenny, we have a Welsh kitchen, a traditional Welsh kitchen. And so here's the panels that talk about domestic history items, including our sugar tongs, and also items related to tea, coffee, cotton, etc. So obviously I don't have time to share the full content of the panels, but I'm just going to read to you the first little couple of sentences of this particular panel, because I think it sort of does a good job of sort of exploring the tone that we were going for here. So it says, the story of some seemingly ordinary and neutral objects in this room is a story of international slavery, exploitation, and human suffering. It's also a story of real improvements to the lives of people in Abergavenny, better materials used to make clothing, furniture, art, food, and drink. How can both of these things be true at the same time? So that's the sort of like prompting question that we started off with. Hopefully that gives you an idea of sort of what we were going for. I'll just pass you back on to Paz now. Next slide, please.
So we use the website, the collection website, as an additional platform to make our work more accessible to the public. The content was created as the intervention text. It started by us, and then to the group, and then to a strategic friend, Marion. In the website and in modes, we decided to use a warning message for specific problematic objects. Coincidentally, adding a warning category was a new feature being developed at the time by modes. This was exciting and interesting to work with them in the feedback and how they're going to make it work. It also meant adding the website developer on the loop to create a new way to add this new feature into the website collection, the collection website. The warning was not intended to censor the object, but to highlight it. So future users, including our own curators and the public, will use the object responsibly. The warning is also an interesting point, as it shows how this process is truly alive. After the stage one was completed, that didn't mean the conversation stopped altogether. Further discussion and after this stage of the project meant that we're currently reviewing the use of the word warning itself, as it may have different connotation to different people. Next slide, please. So this is briefly that you can see now in the website. It's not only a physical description, but it's also the object with a historical note that contextualizes it in this bigger story. Next slide, please. So we just want to finish with a couple of words about how we felt during the project, because it has a lot of different emotional emotional parts as well. Decolonization, it's a scary thing to do because there's a lot of nuance and you never know if you're right, because there is no universal right. But we didn't allow the fear to paralyze us. We support ourselves as a group. Working as a team was really important for the project and to get into a good stage.
Yeah, it's been a real privilege to be able to make these changes and to add in these details that have been sort of taken out of the story. Like Paz said, it has been difficult. We struggled with doubts and thinking, are we doing this right? Like, are we doing the right thing? Are we approaching this in the right way? But like you said, a strong team and supportive working environment has really made all the difference for us. Thank you for coming to our talk. We're really grateful that you've taken the time to listen to us. We're currently in the process of producing a written report on this. So if anybody's interested in that, please feel free to get in contact. Thank you. And thank you to Sarah for doing our slides.